In the bustling trade hub of Orion's Reach, life moved fast and rough. Alien species from across the galaxy thrived in the busy markets, exchanging goods and knowledge. Amidst the crowds, a tiny figure moved with caution. Her name was Kielra, a member of the peaceful, yet often exploited, Zarithu species. Known for their bioluminescent markings, the Zarithu were feared by many, though not always for their abilities, sometimes simply for being different. Kielra's small frame barely reached past the knees of most other beings. Her delicate features were adorned with glowing patterns on her skin, shifting colors depending on her emotions, hues of blues and greens when calm, reds and oranges when upset. These markings had once been a source of pride among her people, but now they made her an outcast in the vast galaxy. Rumors spread that the patterns were cursed, that any Zarithu seen with them brought misfortune. Day after day, Kielra moved through the crowded streets, her steps light and measured. She had no family to return to, no community to offer protection. The other species in Orion's Reach saw her as weak, an easy target for theft and exploitation. And that's exactly what they did. Small-time traders and bounty hunters would approach her, hoping to trick her into revealing the secrets of her people's rare starbound crystals, a power her species alone could harness. Yet, no matter how much she endured, Kielra never gave in. She understood that her survival depended on her silence. One evening, as Kielra wandered through the busy marketplace, her heart heavy with the weight of loneliness, a familiar group of rough-looking aliens surrounded her. They were traders from a criminal faction, notorious for exploiting rare species like the Zarithu. With sly grins, they demanded information about the crystals, their voices low and threatening. "You know too much, little one," growled one, his fingers twitching near the weapon at his side. "You'll tell us where the vault is, or else." Kielra's body trembled slightly, her breath hitching. She had seen others who resisted similar threats, only to end up in chains or worse. But something in her heart told her that this time, things would be different. "Leave me be," Kielra whispered, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the marketplace. The leader stepped closer, his grin widening. "You don't understand, little Zarithu. Your kind are valuable. Alive or not." Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Is that how you treat someone just looking to live their life?" The crowd parted as a figure stepped forward, tall and human. His name was Captain Elias Drake, a mercenary with a reputation as both reckless and resourceful. Humans were a rarity in this part of the galaxy, often dismissed as naive and weak. Yet Elias held a confidence in his stride that demanded respect. "I'd suggest you walk away before you regret it," Elias said, his voice steady, with a hint of amusement. The criminals hesitated, glancing at one another. They had heard stories about humans, how unpredictable and dangerous they could be. One wrong move, and they'd regret it. "Think we're scared of a one-man show," one of the thugs sneered. Elias took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Not just a man," he said. "A man who's seen more than his share of battles. One who values his freedom more than a few credits." The thugs shifted uneasily, weapons half-drawn. They were used to intimidation, not being outmatched. With a frustrated growl, the leader motioned to his gang. "We'll be back, human. And next time, you won't be in the way." The group vanished into the crowd, leaving Elias and Kielra alone. For a moment, neither spoke. Kielra watched Elias cautiously, her heart still pounding. She had never seen a human act so boldly, so confidently, without fear of the unknown. "Are you okay?" Elias finally asked, his voice softer now. Kielra nodded slowly, offering a faint smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No one has ever done that for me." Elias gave a wry grin. "Well, maybe it's time someone did." Together, they stood in the fading light of the marketplace, their bond beginning to take shape amidst a galaxy that often overlooked the smallest heroes. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next part. The stars outside the freighter's windows seemed distant and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth that was slowly growing between Elias and Kilra. The old ship, the Starlight, drifted through the void of space, its engines humming softly in the quiet. Inside, the flicker of dim lights gave the room an intimate, almost cozy feel, despite the ship's worn-down exterior. Kilra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her bioluminescent markings glowing faintly as she gazed at the stars. It had been days since they left Orion's reach, and the galaxy felt just a little bit smaller. Elias sat across from her, adjusting his weapon's holster while keeping an eye on the console. His demeanor was calm, but his mind was constantly alert, scanning for any signs of trouble. "You've been quiet." Elias broke the silence, glancing over at Kilra. She gave a soft smile, her eyes reflecting the passing stars. "There isn't much to say," she replied quietly. "No one ever listens to the Zarithu. Until you." Elias leaned back in his seat, hands resting behind his head. "That's because most people are too quick to judge. You've got more to offer than your markings, a lot more." Kilra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the stars. It was strange, having someone believe in her. It had been so long since anyone had looked past her differences to see who she truly was. "I don't know what you're running from, Kilra," Elias said after a pause. "But I get it. Running can be easier than standing still sometimes." Kilra finally turned to face him, her small hand resting lightly on the console. "You understand more than most," she said softly. "I've always been alone. My people never needed protection. Until now." Elias nodded slowly. "Not everyone can carry the weight of their past alone. Maybe that's why we're better together." Their journey had begun with protection, but it was becoming something more, something neither of them fully understood yet. The bond between them was fragile, but it was growing. Days turned into nights as they traveled further into uncharted territories, always looking over their shoulder for threats. Kilra's abilities to sense the energy of starbound crystals made her invaluable, and Elias's experience in combat and survival gave them an edge. They had become a team, a mismatched pair navigating the vast galaxy hand in hand. One evening, while Elias was scanning their surroundings, Kilra moved to the back of the ship to gather supplies. Her tiny hands carefully arranged the crystals they had salvaged along the way. Though she couldn't always explain how her markings guided her, she knew deep down that they had a purpose, something more than simple genetic markers. Each crystal shimmered with a strange, otherworldly energy, and Kilra felt the power pulsing from them. As she worked, Elias joined her. He watched her for a moment in silence, before speaking. "You've never told me what it feels like," Elias said. "The energy you tap into with your crystals." Kilra paused, her fingers brushing gently over one of the crystals. "It's strange," she admitted softly. "It's like a psalm I can hear, but only when I'm near them. My markings guide me, but the power, they call to me." Elias leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Must be overwhelming." Kilra shook her head slowly. "Are we close?" Kilra asked quietly, breaking the silence. Elias glanced over at her, offering a small nod. "Should be within range soon," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "The coordinates you gave me lead to a hidden vault. Ancient, untouched for centuries. It's the last place anyone would think to look for you." Kilra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I hope it's enough," she said softly. "We've been running for so long." Elias offered a reassuring smile. "It will be. You're not alone anymore." The memory of betrayal was still fresh in her mind. The group of bounty hunters who had tracked them down earlier, led by Elias's former ally, had been relentless. Yet, here they were, still moving forward, still fighting. The coordinates brought them to an uncharted star system deep within a remote sector of the galaxy. The only sign of life was the distant shimmer of asteroid fields, drifting lazily through the darkness. Elias expertly guided the freighter through narrow gaps between floating rocks, their path illuminated only by the soft glow of Kilra's markings. "It should be here," Kilra said after a moment, her voice confident but cautious. I can feel the energy. The vault's defenses have been dormant for centuries, but they'll activate once we're close enough. Elias nodded once more, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Then let's keep moving. Slowly. As they approached a dense cluster of asteroids, the freighter's sensors picked up a faint energy signature, a pulsing glow hidden deep within the asteroid field. It was faint, but unmistakable. "That's it," Kielra whispered, her voice a breath of excitement. "The vault." Elias brought the ship to a steady halt a safe distance from the nearest asteroid. "Ready?" Kielra nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The freighter powered down its engines, its stealth systems. Elias acted quickly. With precision and speed, he took down the nearest drones, his weapons firing in rapid bursts. Each drone destroyed was another step closer to overwhelming odds. "Kielra," Elias called, watching as she grabbed a small crystal, her markings glowing furiously. "We need to go." Kielra hesitated for a moment, looking back at the vault. The power inside was almost too tempting to leave behind, but she knew they couldn't risk it. With a final surge of energy, she sealed the vault and sprinted back to the freighter. "We're leaving," she cried. Elias fired one last shot at an incoming drone and rushed back to the ship. The freighter roared to life as Kielra activated their stealth mode again, weaving through the asteroid field as the automated defenses raged behind them. The starlight shot through space, leaving the ancient vault and its deadly guardians far behind. The galaxy might have feared Kielra and her kind, but together they had proved that even ancient powers couldn't hold them back. The starlight sped through the black void of space, its engines humming smoothly as the galaxy rushed by outside the viewport. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Elias sat at the controls, his focus sharp as he navigated the ship through hazardous asteroid fields and deep space anomalies. Beside him, Kielra sat quietly, her bioluminescent markings dimmed, her thoughts drifting far away. "What do you think they'll do next?" Elias broke the silence, glancing over at Kielra. Kielra's lips pressed into a thin line. "They'll come after us," she said softly. "They'll want the crystals, no matter the cost." Elias nodded, tapping the controls. "We've got a head start, but not much. They won't give up easily." Kielra leaned back in her seat, her small hands folding in her lap. "You shouldn't have to fight for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias turned to her, his gaze steady. "I'm not fighting for you, Kielra. I'm fighting because no one should be forced to carry that burden alone, especially not you." A small smile tugged at the corner of Kielra's lips, but her eyes held the weight of uncertainty. Suddenly, a sharp signal from the ship's radar pulled them from their thoughts. Elias frowned as he checked the screen. "We're not alone." Kielra tensed, her markings flickering softly in response. "More hunters." "No," Elias said grimly. "It's different. They're using a different signature, one I know too well." Kielra's breath hitched. "An ally?" Elias shook his head. "Not anymore." The freighter slowed, a shadowy figure emerging from the depths of space. It was a sleek, heavily armed vessel, designed for combat. And aboard it was someone Elias hadn't expected, a former comrade, someone he thought he could trust. "Captain Drake." The voice over the comms was calm, calculating. "It's been a long time." Elias clenched his fists at the controls. "Ronan," he growled, "what are you doing here?" Ronan's voice carried no warmth. "The crystals, Elias. We had an agreement. You'd help secure them for me." Elias's jaw tightened. "That was before you betrayed me." Ronan chuckled darkly. "Betrayal is a strong word. It's business, Drake. You should understand that." Kielra leaned forward, her small hands gripping the edge of her seat. "He'll sell us out," she said, her voice steady but trembling. "We can't trust him." Elias glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Stay behind me," he ordered softly. Ronan's ship moved closer, cutting off their escape route. "You've made this difficult, Elias. But it's over now. Either you hand over the crystals, or we take them by force. Elias met his gaze, his voice calm yet firm. You forget, Ronan. I'm not alone this time. The truth hung in the air. Kielra's abilities, her connection to the crystals, were more powerful than Ronan had anticipated. Their partnership was more than just a simple trade. They had something neither could control alone. You're making a mistake, Ronan said after a pause. You don't know what you're protecting. Neither do you, Elias shot back. The two ships drifted in a tense standoff, the weight of their histories colliding in the void of space. Ronan's vessel was equipped with advanced weaponry, while the Starlight was older, its strength lying in its maneuverability and stealth systems. You've always been too predictable, Elias, Ronan said, a faint hint of amusement in his voice. And now you've aligned yourself with the smallest, most fragile of creatures. The Zerathu. How quaint. Kielra's markings flared brightly, her anger evident. Fragile, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'll show you fragile. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his gaze softening. Not yet. Ronan's ship began to close the distance again. You don't have a choice. Surrender now, or face annihilation. The tension in the cockpit grew unbearable. Elias's mind raced through every possible scenario. Their odds were slim, but there was no turning back. Suddenly, a burst of energy flashed across the radar. Another vessel, a small, heavily damaged freighter, appeared on the edge of the standoff. It was battered, but the energy signature was unmistakable. Kielra, Elias said, recognizing the ship. Your people? Kielra's eyes widened in realization. It's them. They've come for me. Ronan's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Your people? You've been hiding allies. Elias smirked, his voice low. Looks like you played your hand too soon, Ronan. The sudden arrival of the Zerathu fleet shifted the balance. Ronan's ship faltered, hesitation creeping into his calculated movements. Kielra stood, her bioluminescent markings glowing brighter than ever. You're not alone anymore, she said, her voice filled with strength. Neither of you. Elias opened a channel to the Zerathu fleet. Keep them distracted, he ordered. We'll take care of the rest. The battle was far from over, but with new allies by their side, Elias and Kielra stood together, ready to face whatever came next. The battlefield in the depths of space was chaotic. Ronan's ship and the heavily armed Zerathu fleet clashed, their energy weapons flashing through the void. Explosions rocked the surroundings as metallic fragments drifted aimlessly in the aftermath. Elias and Kielra piloted the Starlight through the chaos, weaving between bursts of fire and debris. Kielra sat at the co-pilot's seat, her bioluminescent markings pulsing brightly in sync with her emotions. We can't keep this up, she said, her voice tense. Ronan's ship is too well equipped. Elias's hands danced over the controls, his mind sharp and focused. We don't have to take them head-on, he said calmly. We need to outmaneuver him. The agile freighter slipped through a gap in the battle, narrowly avoiding a volley of energy blasts. Elias spun the ship around to fire back, giving cover as the Zerathu ships pressed forward. Keep them busy, Elias called out. We'll handle Ronan. Kielra's gaze hardened. It's not just Ronan. He has allies, mercenaries, scavengers, anyone willing to fight for power. They'll do whatever it takes to get those crystals. Suddenly, the comms crackled with static. Ronan's voice echoed through the interference. You think you can escape me, Elias. This is just the beginning. You can't run from your past forever. Elias gritted his teeth. Neither can you, he responded through clenched fists. And today it ends. Ronan's ship loomed closer, his smug grin visible even in the heat of battle. His ship's design, sleek and deadly, was built for domination. It had been his tool for years, and he wasn't ready to let go. Evasive maneuvers, Elias barked, as a barrage of fire was aimed directly at the Starlight. The ship twisted, dodging the attack with precision. We're not going to fight him directly, just delay him long enough for the Zerathu fleet to weaken his defenses. Killer's markings flared as she connected with the ship's systems, sensing the energy buildup in Ronan's ship. "He's charging something. A final attack," she said urgently. "We don't have much time." Elias's voice was calm despite the growing pressure. "Hold your ground, Hilra. Let him come." The moment stretched into tense silence as Ronan's ship prepared for the final strike. Energy began to pulse through the vessel's weapon systems, creating a blinding glow of destruction. The Starlight raced to distance itself but was too slow. Just as the first blast was unleashed, a sudden wave of energy erupted from the Zerathu fleet, intercepting the blast. Ronan's ship shuddered as his power was neutralized, the fleet's ancient defenses overwhelming his attempts. Killer's breath hitched as she watched the display. It worked. Elias took a deep breath, his hand steady. "Now finish him." With the advantage regained, the Starlight pressed forward. Elias expertly navigated the ship through the weakening defensive lines, closing the distance between them and Ronan's stricken vessel. "You'll regret this," Ronan growled, his voice filled with fury. His crew scrambled to repair the damage, but it was too late. The Starlight was upon him, and Elias was not in a forgiving mood. Energy blasts tore through Ronan's ship, dismantling its once imposing armor piece by piece. The sounds of battle faded as Elias pressed forward, ensuring there was no escape. Finally, with a final blast, Ronan's ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light and energy, consumed by the void. Kilra watched in stunned silence, her heart racing with relief and exhaustion. "It's over," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Elias exhaled deeply, slumping back into his seat. "Not yet," he said quietly. "We still have the crystals to secure. The Zerathu fleet can only hold so long against outside forces." The battle wasn't won, not fully. The remnants of Ronan's allies continued to press forward, but with Ronan's defeat, their morale was shattered. The tide had shifted in their favor. Kilra's markings dimmed, but her eyes remained sharp. "We'll manage," she said confidently. "Together." Elias looked at her, a small smile forming. "That's the spirit." The Starlight accelerated once more, pushing through the remnants of the battlefield. With each passing second, the danger lessened, replaced by the certainty of their mission's success. The Starlight floated quietly in the shadow of a distant moon, its engines silenced to preserve the stealth mode. Inside the ship, the air was thick with tension. Elias sat at the console, his eyes scanning the monitors for any sign of movement. Across from him, Kilra sat on a small crate, her bioluminescent markings dimmed, but her focus intense. "We're safe for now," Elias murmured, breaking the silence. "But we can't stay hidden forever." Kilra nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "They're still looking for us. Ronan may be gone, but his influence remains." Elias leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his short hair. "It's not just Ronan's allies we need to worry about. There are factions in the galaxy that want those crystals for themselves. Power like that, it's dangerous in the wrong hands." Kilra's small frame tensed. "We can't let that happen." Elias studied her quietly. She had grown stronger, more confident with every challenge they faced together. Her connection to the crystals was unlike anything he had seen before. Her ability to sense energy and manipulate it was a force to be reckoned with. "There's a planet nearby," Elias said, pointing to a distant blue orb on the screen. "A neutral ground. At least for now. We can lay low, gather more information, and figure out our next move." Kilra rose from her seat, her markings pulsing faintly in agreement. "It's risky, but it's our best chance." The planet, Valderia, was a bustling hub for traders, mercenaries, and those seeking refuge. Known for its shifting alliances and neutral ground, it provided a brief respite for those caught in the web of galactic conflicts. As the Starlight descended toward the planet, Elias kept watch, his instincts sharp. Kilra sat nearby, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. This wasn't just a sanctuary. They needed to use this time wisely. The ship touched down softly in a secluded sector, away from prying eyes. Moments later, the hatch hissed open, and they stepped onto the surface of Valyria. The planet's surface was a patchwork of neon lights and bustling streets. People of every species moved through the crowds, their motives hidden behind smiles and masked expressions. Valyria was a place where stories were told and secrets were traded. "We need allies," Elias said as they made their way into the city. "Ones we can trust. No more betrayal." Keilora walked quietly beside him, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Trust is hard to come by," she said softly, "but we'll find those who share our goals." Their journey took them through winding alleys and shadowed markets. At last, they found a quiet bar nestled in the heart of the city, a haven for those seeking information without revealing too much. Inside, the dim light flickered against worn tables and stools. Elias and Keilora sat at a corner booth, the hum of quiet conversations surrounding them. It was here that they hoped to gather the pieces they needed, a network of loyal allies. A hooded figure approached them, their voice low and cautious. "You're looking for something." Elias met the stranger's gaze. "Information, protection, power." The figure nodded slowly, settling into the seat across from them. "You're not the first to seek help here. But your path is dangerous. Very few walk away unscathed." "We've already been through enough," Elias said, his voice steady. "We need people who can protect what's important." Keilora spoke up, her voice clear. "The crystals. They hold power that could change the galaxy. We can't let them fall into the wrong hands." The hooded figure considered them for a moment before responding. "There are those who understand the weight of such power, but alliances come with their price. Are you ready to pay it?" Elias leaned forward slightly. "We're ready." The figure nodded once. "Then stay here. Keep your heads low. We'll reach out when the time is right." As the figure left, Elias exhaled deeply. "We've made the right move. Valyria isn't safe, but it's a step forward." Keilora gave a small smile, though her thoughts were distant. "Every step takes us closer to the truth." The city of Valyria buzzed with life around them. But for once, Elias and Keilora found solace in knowing they weren't alone. Their path was still uncertain, and danger was never far away. But together, they would face whatever the galaxy threw at them. The neon-lit streets of Valyria stretched endlessly, their chaotic beauty masking the uneasy tension that hung in the air. Elias and Keilora moved through the crowded markets, blending into the masses as they sought out their next allies. Their steps were deliberate. Each corner of the bustling cityscape watched carefully, every shadow a possible threat. Keilora's bioluminescent markings flickered softly, a calm contrast to her alert expression. "This place is more dangerous than we anticipated," she said quietly. Elias kept his voice low, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Every step forward is a risk, but standing still is worse." They had been on Valyria for days now, connecting with small factions and outcasts who might share their vision. The crystals were a beacon, drawing attention from the galaxy's power players, some seeking to control them, others to destroy them entirely. "We're running out of time," Elias added. "The longer we wait, the more danger we bring to those we've made alliances with." Keilora's gaze softened as she looked up at him. "We're not alone anymore," she said, her voice firm. "We have allies who believe in our cause. They've seen the potential of the crystals, and they fear what could happen if we fail." Elias nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Then we'll make sure we don't fail." Their network had grown stronger, their allies gathering in secret. Each faction brought something different: intel, resources, and the shared goal of protecting the crystals from those who would exploit them. But trust was fragile, and betrayal was never far away. They arrived at a hidden rendezvous deep within Valyria's underbelly, a dimly lit space where only the most trusted gathered. Among them were former warriors, scientists, and outcasts who had seen too much of the galaxy's cruelty. The meeting began with cautious whispers, alliances being tested in the balance of power. Elias stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding attention. Beside him, Kielra remained calm, her energy steady. Ronan may be gone, Ilias began, his voice steady. But the threat remains. The crystals will bring power, but that power comes at a cost. A tall figure in the shadows stepped forward, his voice deep and resonant. "And what do you propose, Captain?" "That we sacrifice everything to protect a handful of ancient artifacts." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "No, I propose we use that power to create something better. A galaxy where greed doesn't control destiny." Killer's markings flickered in agreement. "We've seen what happens when people misuse this power. It's not just about control anymore. It's about survival." The room grew quiet, the weight of their words settling over the gathering. For a moment, it seemed as if the very air held its breath. Then, one by one, the murmurs began, an acknowledgement of their shared vision. "We fight for freedom," a voice called out from the back. "Not for the few, but for everyone," another added. Elias' small smile widened. "Together, we can stand against anything they throw at us." The unity in the room was fragile, but real. Each person there understood the risks, and they were willing to face them. They had been shaped by their experiences, by the loss and hardship they had endured. Now, they had a chance to forge a new path. But their victory wasn't certain. Across the galaxy, rival factions continued to pursue the crystals, and with them, the untold power they held. The battle was far from over. As the meeting came to a close, Elias and Kielra moved quietly through the gathering. They knew the dangers that awaited them, but their resolve was unshaken. "We've planted the seeds of change," Elias said as they exited the hidden space. "Now we just have to water them." Kielra glanced at him, her expression calm but determined, "and protect them at all costs." The streets of Valyria were alive again, the city's chaotic pulse returning. But for Elias and Kielra, the fight was far from over. The final convergence of allies was only the beginning of a battle that would shape the future of the galaxy.